are making their voices heard as loudly as they can above the din, above all the distraction and diversion that goes on in our political discourse right now. So I do think many, many more people are being given the opportunity to reject what Trump offers, what he represents. Not as many. The race is still too close. The Electoral College is still the big hurdle that has to be overcome. But I am, very hopeful and even optimistic that Americans who do not want to see a continuation of this politics of hate and division will reject Trump. And maybe some Republicans who know that they can't vote for Trump will end up voting for the Harris-Walz ticket as well.
I think anything Hillary Clinton has to say is always not just significant, interesting and relevant. The position of being a candidate to be president of the United States of America is very unique, and for me carries a lot of responsibility that some people don't seem to appreciate. This is not a bragging contest. This is not a boasting contest. This is not an attempt to win a reality show, even though there are people like, J.D. Vance and Trump who seem to think that's what's going on. And you also look at how it shifted. Even if you go back to 2016, when it was Hillary versus a former guy, well, at least to a certain extent, policy was at the heart of the discussion. Whereas now it's just, Hillary talks about misinformation, and spreading the misinformation should be something that should be seriously looked at. And I've noticed the only people complaining about this are the perpetrators, those who spread misinformation, those who spread lies, those who... look at J.D. Vance and Trump, how they've used the lies about Haitian immigrants and pets and dogs. That is a clear, outrageous lie.
I'm struck by the fact that as his campaign careens into very, very offensive territory, the association with Holocaust deniers and the outrages at Arlington National Cemetery, of all places, the insults to recipients of the Medal of Honor, the recent incredibly racist and dangerous lies about specific groups of immigrants, Haitians in this case, and Venezuelans in the case of Colorado. I am struck by the fact that as much as we thought we might have been inoculated against sort of outrage tactics like that, where everything else gets thrown by the wayside and everybody starts responding to his outrage du jour, it's a way of sort of yanking everybody's chain. I sort of feel like we haven't learned, and he's still being taught, especially by the media, that the more offensive he is, the more he can dominate the media space entirely. And I feel like you've been a good diagnoser of that, not only from when you were up against him, but from what others have done. So do you have an antidote for that, or a way that people can talk themselves out of taking that bait?
I think that's really a critical question, and I think there's a couple of things going on here. You mentioned the press, and sadly, the press is still not able to cover Trump the way that they should. They careen from one outrage to the next. What was outrageous 3 days ago is no longer on the front pages, even though it threatens the physical safety of so many people, particularly, as you point out, immigrants that he and Vance have decided to demonize. And I don't understand why it's so difficult for the press to have a consistent narrative about how dangerous Trump is. The late, great journalist Harry Evans, one time said that, journalists should, really try to achieve objectivity. And by that, he said, they should cover the object. Well, the object in this case is Donald Trump. His demagoguery, his danger to our country and the world, and stick with it. they were merciless about what they saw as President Biden's, problems in the debate and calling for him to withdraw. I believe Donald Trump has disqualified himself over and over and over again to be a presidential candidate, let alone a president. The second thing, though, is that.
And you also have a situation where maybe people don't want to know the truth. It suits them that the truth is presented to them in a tweet or a line on Fox News. Because there is a simple fact that people do forget. It doesn't matter which party or which political person's in charge, there's still going to be basic scenarios which need to be sorted out. Like roads, infrastructure. That sounds so silly. There's still going to have to be budgets which need to be sorted out. The ideology moves to one side. And understand one thing. Those who are marinating the ideology, the extreme ideology, shouting and just putting out garbage, they have a reason why they're doing it. They're making money. Right? It's not that you see somebody on blue tick Twitter who's interested in maybe your local school or your medical bills or anything or gun safety. No. How can they get clout? How can they get attention? Because one thing I have noted, and this is firmly at the floor of Trump and JD Vance, it's all you're doing this, you're doing that. It's never any answers. Take Fox News. They will spend 5 minutes attacking Kamala Harris, 30 seconds saying how good Trump is. They never actually go through in detail anything Trump is proposing to do to solve a situation. Yet with Kamala Harris, if she says anything, they will literally hold it up for extreme scrutiny. Even the recent attempted assassination, it's been politicized, not in terms of our president or political voice is safe, but in terms of how this is wrong and being used against President Trump, and the Democrats' language and rhetoric is to blame. Whereas if you actually look at it, a lot of the nastiness, a lot of the verbal lies, and real vile stuff is from just look, for example, at what Elon Musk and Trump said about Taylor Swift. You've got an 80-year-old man saying he hates Taylor Swift. Beggars belief. So as I said, you can't just say, oh, Hillary Clinton is a political figure, she didn't make it as president. I think she has a lot to say, which is spot on the money.
Part of what Trump is counting on is for people to get desensitized. I mean, oh my gosh, did you hear what he said yesterday? Did you hear who he attacked? Did you hear the viciousness? And it just like with a shrug, okay, fine, we're moving on. Well, Americans need to understand that they have to take Trump both seriously and literally. He has said what he wants to do. He and his allies with Project 2025, his desire to be a dictator, at least on day one, all of that is in the public record. And I believe that more Americans have to be, willing to endure what frankly is discomforting and to some extent kind of painful. To take him at his word and to be outraged by what he represents. And then finally, the hopeful side of this is that I do think more and more Americans are, rejecting the kind of chaos that he represents. We can't go back. That's what the Harris campaign says all the time. We're not going back. We're not going back to, what he failed to do to protect American lives during COVID. We're not going back to the, romance with dictators that puts, innocent lives at risk and America's security in danger. We can't go back and give this very dangerous man another chance to do harm to our country and the world.
Speaking of dictators, the Justice Department and the State Department have taken a number of actions in the past several weeks, striking actions to both call out and indict and take action against the Kremlin for their attempts at interfering in this, in yet another presidential election cycle on Trump's behalf. The State Department has put out a $10 million reward for information leading to, for information about people who are trying to, about entities that are trying to illegally interfere in our election. We've seen these dramatic indictments from the Justice Department, including for paying millions of dollars, the Kremlin paying millions of dollars to pro-Trump influencers. We've seen the Justice Department seize web domains where the Kremlin had set up news sites, what looked like news sites, looked like versions of American news sites, but were secretly operated by the Russian intelligence services or by the Russian government. Do you feel like the U.S. government is sort of starting to figure out how to do this and taking this seriously enough, or do you still think there's a far distance to go?
I think there's a far distance to go. I applaud the actions taken by the Justice Department and the State Department. I think that they're very important. But truly, we are just at the beginning of uncovering everything that Russia, but not just Russia, other countries have done and are doing to influence our election. If you focus on Russia, and I commend you, Rachel, for your new movie, because we are only at the beginning of understanding the whole iceberg here. What the Russians started doing in 2015 and 2016, what they continued doing, they've gotten more sophisticated. They aren't even pretending anymore. You know, their international news operation, Russia Today, RT, is an arm of the Russian government, an arm of its intelligence operation. It's basically an extension of their spying efforts. They are using Americans, both those who are witting and willing, and those who are unwitting and are just so surprised. They're getting, you know, $400,000 a week or $100,000 a podcast to parrot Kremlin propaganda. And we know from what even Republicans have said, the chairs of the Intelligence Committee and the, Foreign Affairs Committee and other Republicans who are currently in office have said that Republicans go to the floor of the Congress and they parrot Russian talking points. So I think it's important to indict the Russians, just as Mueller indicted a lot of Russians who were engaged in direct election interference and boosting Trump back in 2016. But I also think there are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda. And whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that would be a better deterrence, because the Russians are unlikely, except in a very few cases, to ever stand trial in the United States. You know, they're not going to be going to a country where they can be extradited or even returning to the United States unless they are very foolish. So I think we need to uncover all of the connections and make it very clear that you could vote however you want. But we are not going to let adversaries, whether it is Russia, China, Iran, or anybody else, basically try to influence Americans as to how we should vote in picking our leaders.
Hillary Rodham Clinton.